The applause starts before I even realize what is happening. One moment I am standing near the wall with my notes pressed against my side, watching the final slide fade on the screen. The next, the room erupts. Senior leadership is on their feet. Hands clapping. Broad smiles spreading from one end of the table to the other. And my supervisor, Donovan, is standing at the front of the room absorbing all of it. He grins the way a man grins when he has just pulled off something he is privately very proud of. He raises one hand slightly, a modest deflection, and says, "It took a real vision to bring this one home." Vision. I feel my jaw tighten. 3 hours ago, he told me to stay near the back during the presentation. Let leadership hear this from the right voice, he said. I assumed he would mention my name at some point. Credit the strategy. Say something. He never looked at me once. Not during the slides I built. Not during the financial model I spent 3 late nights redesigning. Not when he explained the client relationship using the same words I had written in my notes. My words. My work. My 6 months. His applause. I sit in the chair nearest the wall and hold my notebook in both hands. The notebook has 3 months of client notes in it, meeting summaries, preference logs, quotes from the CEO that helped me understand what the proposal needed to say. I have been carrying it everywhere since the first week I took over this account. Donovan doesn't know most of what is in it. He joined the meetings late, when the relationship was already built and the risk had already passed. He asked for copies of my slides 2 weeks ago and I sent them, because that is what you do when your supervisor asks. You share your work. You assume good intent. But watching him now, with the executive team clapping him on the back, I understand something I should have named a month ago. He was never going to mention me. Not because he forgot. Not because he was nervous in front of leadership. He didn't mention me because he made a calculation that I would swallow it. That people like me always do. We are trained to take the professional high road. We are trained to believe that good work speaks for itself eventually. We are trained to smile and say it was a team effort. What we are not trained to account for is the one person Donovan never thought to manage. The client. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you what kind of person I am. My name is Abigail Turner. I have worked in this company for 4 years. I am not the loudest person in any room. I am the one who arrives early, stays late, reads the documents other people skim, and builds client relationships that take months of small consistent effort and look effortless from the outside. I am also the person who has been told, more than once, that I am too quiet to be leadership material. My supervisor took credit for my major contract, then the client asked for me by name. People like Donovan count on people like me in a specific way. They count on us to do the work carefully and completely. They count on us to take the professional high road when things feel wrong. They count on us, above all, not to make noise. What they never quite calculate is who the client actually trusts. The client has no reason to protect anyone's feelings. The client doesn't know about office hierarchies or who needs a win more than someone else. The client just remembers who solved their problem. And in this case, the client was about to say so. In writing, on a thread that included senior leadership, at the exact moment it would matter most. 6 months before the applause, the Carver account was considered dead. I want to be specific because it matters. This was not a warm account that needed careful handling. It was a cold, frustrated, nearly lost relationship. The client, Carver Industrial, a mid-sized manufacturing firm, had already sat through 2 failed proposals from our company. The first had misread their operational structure entirely. The second had presented a pricing model so disconnected from their budget that their CEO ended the call early. Our record with them was embarrassing. Leadership had written the account off in everything but name. No one was pursuing it. The file sat in a shared drive nobody was updating. When it came up in team meetings, people flinched. That was the account Donovan handed me. Not as an opportunity. Not as a vote of confidence. He dropped the folder on my desk on a Monday afternoon with the casual energy of someone who had mentally moved on. Last attempt, he said. See if you can salvage anything. No pressure if it doesn't go anywhere. No pressure. Which meant no expectations. Which meant he would not be embarrassed if I failed. I opened the folder. I started reading. The first call with Carver's CEO did not go well, and I expected that. His name was Philip Adeyemi. He was direct in the way people are direct when they have been disappointed enough times to stop softening things. He picked up the phone and within 30 seconds had made his position clear. You're the third consultant your firm has sent me, he said. The first two wasted my time. I'm giving this 15 minutes. I didn't apologize on behalf of the company or launch into a pitch. I said, that's fair. Can I ask you something before I say anything else? He paused. Go ahead. The two previous proposals, what specifically did they get wrong? He started talking. He talked for 40 minutes. About what his company actually needed, different from what our previous consultants had assumed. About the operational constraints that made standard implementation timelines unworkable. About the internal pressures no one had bothered to ask about. I took notes the entire time. I asked follow-up questions. I did not pitch anything. At the end he said, okay. Send me something when you have it. That was the beginning. I spent the next 4 weeks rebuilding the proposal from nothing. Not updating the previous one. Not patching what had failed. Starting fresh, because the previous proposals had been built on assumptions that were wrong from the foundation, and you cannot fix a rotten base by adjusting the windows. I organized Philip Adeyemi's comments from my notes by theme. Operational flexibility was his first concern. He needed phased implementation that could pause if production demands required it. Budget predictability was the second. He had been burned by variable pricing before. The third was accountability. He wanted one consistent contact, not a rotating cast. I built a financial model around the first two concerns. For the third, I told Philip during our next call that I would be his direct contact for the duration. That if something came up, he could call me. He was quiet for a moment. You can promise that? Yes, I said. I meant it. It was the right thing for the relationship. What I didn't consider was whether Donovan would honor that arrangement later, when the deal got close enough to be worth something. That was my mistake. Not the work. The trust. By week 5 the proposal was taking real shape. The financial model had gone through 4 full revisions. The timeline had been restructured twice in response to constraints Philip had shared on calls. The implementation plan was built around Carver Industrial's production calendar. Philip had mentioned that August was their highest volume month, so I built the schedule to avoid that window entirely. I was also learning the company in ways that went beyond the proposal. Philip told me the previous consultants had never asked about his team. Every proposal had been addressed to him alone, which created resentment among his department heads when they were eventually brought in to evaluate the work. So I asked about his team. He told me about his operations director, Priya, who was skeptical about the phasing, and his financial controller who had specific questions about the transition cost structure. I revised the proposal to address both of them directly. I worked 3 late evenings that week. On the last one, close to 9 o'clock, I looked at what I had built and thought, this might actually work. I sent Donovan a brief update the next morning. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. The email from Philip Adeyemi arrived on a Thursday evening at 7:43. I had been reviewing the final pricing page when my phone buzzed. I saw his name in the notification and felt the quick, tight nervousness of waiting to find out if something you have worked hard on will land. I opened it. Abigail, I'd been through the proposal twice. This is the first document your firm has sent us that actually describes our situation correctly. The phasing structure works. The cost model is what we needed. I want to schedule a call to discuss next steps. I read it twice. Then I sat very still and let it settle. 8 weeks of work. 4 revisions. Dozens of hours of calls and late evenings. I forwarded the email to Donovan with a one-line note. Carver is responding. They want to schedule next steps. His reply came within minutes. Good work. I'll take it from here on the executive calls. I stared at that message. I'll take it from here. I wrote back, I think continuity is important here. Philip specifically asked for a consistent contact. Donovan replied, understood. We'll do both. We did not do both. Over the next 3 weeks, Donovan began attending every client call. At first he joined quietly, background presence, mostly listening. I told myself this was normal. Senior people involve themselves when a big contract gets close. But then the calls changed. He began speaking first. Introducing himself to Philip as the lead on the account. Describing the strategy as something the team had developed. Redirecting Philip's detailed questions toward me, but framing it as delegation rather than acknowledging that I was the one with the answers. Philip's tone shifted slightly. He would direct questions to me regardless of who Donovan was addressing, because he had learned which voice knew the material. But Donovan had positioned himself as the decision-maker, and Philip was too professional to contradict that arrangement directly. I kept showing up. Kept answering questions. Kept managing the relationship with the same consistency I had maintained from the beginning. But I also started forwarding every significant email to my personal account. Not as a weapon. Not as a plan. Just the way you reach for something solid when you feel the ground shifting, quietly, without drama, because you know what it means when your hands are empty. 2 weeks before the contract decision, leadership requested a progress update. Donovan came to my desk the afternoon before the briefing. I'm leading the presentation to leadership, he said. I need your slides by end of day. I had already prepared everything. The narrative, the proposal highlights, the client relationship summary, the financial projections. I had assumed we would present together. Are we co-presenting? I asked. I'll handle the executive side, he said. Stay available if they have technical questions. Philip Adeyemi asked for continuity. Leadership should know I'm the primary contact. I'll make sure that's reflected in the presentation, he said. He did not make it reflected. The next morning I sat near the wall while Donovan stood at the front of the room and walked through my slides, my strategy, and my client relationship notes in front of our company's senior leadership. He used my exact words. He did not say my name once. That was the moment I stopped assuming good intent. That was the moment I understood, completely and finally, what I was dealing with and what I needed to do about it. After the applause, I did the only thing I could do in that moment. I left the room quietly. Not dramatically. I gathered my notebook and my bag, walked out through the side door while the executive team was still surrounding Donovan, went back to my desk, and thought carefully about what had just happened and what my options were. There were 2. Option 1, say something immediately. Go back in, interrupt the congratulations, and tell leadership that the work they were celebrating had been done by me. Which was true. But which would also, in the political reality of that office, make me look like I couldn't be gracious about a team win. Option 2, stay calm and let the situation keep moving. Because there was one person Donovan had not managed in all of this. One person who had no reason to protect his version of events. One person who knew exactly who had earned their trust. The client. Philip Adeyemi had been on every call. He had read every revision. He knew which voice had been consistent and which had appeared only when the risk was gone. I went back to work. I waited. The email arrived 4 hours later. I was at my desk updating a separate project file when the notification came through. I saw the sender name and felt something in my chest release, a tension I had been holding since I walked out of that conference room. Philip Adeyemi. Subject line, quick question. Abigail, we're ready to move into the final stage. I'd like to go through the implementation schedule one more time before we sign. Can we get on a call this week? I want to make sure we're aligned on the phasing before the contract is finalized. The email was addressed to me directly. Not to Donovan. Not to the general account inbox. To me, at my direct address, which Philip had been using since our second call 6 months ago. I read it 3 times. Not because I had missed anything. Because I wanted to sit with what it meant. The client, at the most important moment of the entire process, had not reached out to the man who had just accepted a room full of applause for landing this contract. He had reached out to me. I began typing my reply. Donovan's name appeared in my peripheral vision. He was crossing the office floor toward my desk. He had seen the email on the shared account dashboard. I learned this later from a colleague. Donovan had spotted the notification, changed direction, and was already walking toward me before I had finished reading Philip's message. He arrived at my desk with his hands in his pockets, working to look casual. Philip Adeyemi emailed, he said. Yes, I said. I'll take the call. Said the way he said most things, as a decision already made, presented as information. He addressed the email to me specifically, I said. He wants to go through the implementation phasing before signing. I know the implementation plan, Donovan said. He knew the slide deck. He did not know the 6 months behind it, the specific conversations about Carver's production calendar, the discussions with Priya about phasing concerns, the calls where Philip had explained the budget politics that shaped the cost model. He asked for me, I said simply. Donovan picked up my desk phone, opened the shared inbox, and replied to Philip's email himself, writing that he would personally handle the call. I watched him do it. Then I opened my personal email on my phone, under the desk, and waited. Philip Adeyemi's reply arrived 11 minutes later. It went to the shared inbox, which meant Donovan saw at the same moment I did. Donovan, appreciate the response. No offense, but I'd prefer to speak with Abigail directly. She has the full context on the phasing and I want to make sure we're aligned before the contract goes forward. Could you copy her in? Because our email system automatically threaded account communications, the reply also reached the 2 senior leadership members who had been CC'd on the account thread 6 weeks earlier when the deal was first escalated. They saw it. Everyone on that chain saw the client, at the moment of finalizing the most significant contract our department had seen in 2 years, ask specifically for me and not for the man who had just accepted a standing ovation for landing it. The crack opened. It was not small. I looked up from my phone. Donovan was staring at his screen with an expression I had not seen before, the expression of a man rapidly calculating how much has just changed and finding that the number is large. I did not say anything. I didn't need to. I was the one who called Philip Adeyemi back. Donovan was still at his desk when I dialed. I did not hide the call or make it from another room. I sat where I was, opened my notebook to the implementation timeline page, and put the phone to my ear. Philip picked up on the second ring. Abigail, he said, and the relief in his voice was unmistakable. Philip. I have the phasing schedule in front of me. Let's go through it. We talked for 50 minutes. He had 4 specific questions about the August window, exactly what I had anticipated and built contingency language into the contract for. He had a question from Priya in operations about the system transition protocol, which I could answer specifically because Priya had raised a version of it 3 weeks earlier and I had it documented in my notebook. He had one question about the pricing structure. I walked him through the cost model line by line. At the end he said, okay. We're good. Legal will reach out this week. I'll be your contact through the full implementation, I said. Good, he said. That's what I wanted to hear. I set down the phone. Donovan had not moved. The moment I set down the phone, my department head appeared in the doorway. Her name was Nadia Osei. Precise, fair, and perceptive in the way of people who pay close attention before they speak. She looked at me. then at Donovan. Then back at me. Abigail, she said quietly. My office. I followed her down the hall. She closed the door and sat across from me without opening with small talk. Philip Adeyemi's email went to the account thread, she said. I read it this afternoon. I also looked back through the thread history. She paused. I want to hear from you. About the account. From the beginning. So I told her. I did not editorialize. I did not embellish. I spoke from the timeline the way I had spoken on every client call, specifically, chronologically, with documentation to support each point. I told her about the Monday Donovan dropped a dead account on my desk without expecting me to succeed. About the first call with Philip. About the weeks of proposal revisions. About the night Philip emailed to say the proposal finally made sense. About the moment Donovan replied to that message with "I'll take it from here." About the presentation where he used my exact words and never said my name. Nadia listened to every word. I spoke for about 25 minutes. I started from the beginning, the exact date Donovan assigned the account, the language he used, the clear implication that he expected nothing to come of it. I walked through the first call with Philip, the 40 minutes of listening. Each revision of the proposal. The late evenings. The decision to build the plan around Carver's specific constraints. I described the point when Donovan began joining the calls. How he introduced himself as the account lead, how Philip continued directing questions to me regardless. I told her about the morning of the leadership presentation. Donovan asking for my slides. Telling me to stay near the back. The exact phrase, "Let leadership hear this from the right voice." And I told her what happened in that room, that he had used my words, walked through my work, and not once said my name. When I finished, Nadia was quiet. Do you have documentation? She asked. I told her I had the full email archive. Proposal drafts with version dates. Call logs from the client account system. 6 months of notebook entries. She nodded. Send me the email chain. All of it. Yes, I said. I sent it that evening. Every thread, organized chronologically, from the original assignment to Philip's reply that afternoon. Nadia had already begun reviewing the project record before I sent her anything. I learned this later. By the time Donovan tried to manage the narrative the following morning, calling an unscheduled team meeting to talk about collective contribution on major wins, Nadia had spent the previous evening in the account system, cross-referencing the email archive against the client activity log. The activity log tracked everything. Every call made. Every document accessed. Every communication sent, timestamped and attributed. It showed exactly when Donovan had first appeared in the account record, week 9. 7 weeks after I had made the first call. 4 weeks after Philip had responded positively to the rebuilt proposal. It showed every call I had made and every one Donovan had joined. The record of who had done the work and who had arrived when the risk was gone was sitting in the system in plain, inarguable data. Nadia had also sent Philip Adeyemi a brief professional note asking one quiet question. Who had been his primary point of contact throughout the engagement? Philip's reply arrived within the hour. One name. Mine. Donovan's team meeting the next morning did not go the way he intended. He arrived and opened it the way he opened most meetings, confidently, with the air of someone about to provide clarity. He talked about the Carver account, the importance of recognizing collective effort on major wins, how team achievements should always reflect everyone's contribution. Collective effort. I kept my expression neutral. He mentioned my name twice. Both times as part of a general team. Neither time as the person who had rebuilt the account from a dead file and spent 6 months earning a client's trust. After the meeting, a colleague named Fuad appeared at my desk. Fuad had been watching the situation with quiet attention for weeks, the kind of attention quiet people get to things they understand before they're named. He's scared, Fuad said. He's trying to get ahead of the story before someone else tells it. I nodded. He's too late, I said. And I meant it. Not with satisfaction, or not only with satisfaction. Mostly I meant it the way you mean something when you have done the work and kept the records and told the truth in the right place to the right person. The story was already being told. It was in the system. It was in Philip's reply. It was in Nadia's notes. Donovan was performing to an audience that had already left the room. The final contract call was scheduled for 2 days later. Philip Adeyemi was on the line with his legal team. Our side included me, Nadia, and the head of our contracts division. Donovan had been listed on the original invite. The morning of the call, I noticed his name was gone from the attendee list. I did not ask why. The call lasted 90 minutes. Philip's legal team walked through the contract terms. 3 points required clarification about the implementation phasing, all 3 of which I could address specifically because I had been in every conversation where the phasing had been discussed and negotiated. At one point the contracts director asked me to walk through the contingency language for the August production window. I did it from memory and then confirmed it against my notebook. Philip said, "That's exactly what we agreed." That's what I needed to hear. At the end, Philip asked, "Abigail, you're staying on this account through implementation?" Nadia answered before I could. "She's leading it." Philip said, "Good." I felt it then, not triumph exactly. Something more solid. Like a foundation settling into ground that had been uncertain for a very long time, and finally holding. After the call ended, Nadia and I stayed on the line. The contracts director had signed off. The connection was quiet. "I want to say something directly," Nadia said. I waited. Philip Adeyemi's email would have been enough on its own. When a client, at the moment of finalizing the most significant contract our department has signed in 2 years, specifically asks not to speak with the senior person who presented to leadership, that is not a small signal. That is the whole story. I thought about the morning Donovan stood at the front of the room. The applause. His speech about vision. The way the room had believed him completely because he was in the right place with the right slides at the right moment. What happens now? I asked. Being handled above my level, she said. What I can tell you is that leadership has been fully briefed and the account record has been reviewed. She paused. I've made a recommendation about account leadership going forward. She did not tell me what the recommendation was. I had a reasonable idea. One more thing, she said. I should have been paying closer attention to this account from the beginning. That's on me as much as anyone. It was a real apology. Not a policy statement. I thanked her. 2 days after the contract was signed, Donovan was reassigned. The announcement came through internal email, in the smooth language companies use when they want to signal a change in status without describing it directly. He was moving to a different division. Smaller portfolio. Fewer client-facing responsibilities. The word lateral appeared in the message. Fuad sent me a note, lateral. Sure. I didn't reply. What I kept thinking about was not Donovan, not the reassignment, not the applause, not the meeting where he had used my words and accepted credit for my 6 months. I was thinking about something more specific. Credibility cannot actually be transferred. He had borrowed mine and worn it long enough to get a room full of applause. But when Philip Adeyemi needed to finalize a contract, he did not call the man who could perform credibility. He called the person who had built it, one conversation at a time, over 6 months of consistent, careful, unglamorous work. You can stand in front of a room and describe someone else's competence. You cannot take it with you. The moment a real question lands, what you borrowed disappears and what you actually know is what remains. Donovan had nothing left once the real question started. 2 days after Donovan's reassignment, Nadia called me into her office. This time the door stayed open. I noticed that immediately. She had the Carver account file in front of her, the real one, with the full version history of the proposal and the complete client communication record. The version that showed the timeline accurately. She thanked me first for the documentation, for staying professional during a period she acknowledged had been genuinely hard, and for handling the final contract call without making the situation awkward for the client. Then she offered me leadership of the Carver account through the full implementation phase. Direct client contact. Budget authority. A promotion to senior consultant, effective the following quarter. I asked questions about reporting structure, team resources, and what lessons from the account would be incorporated into how large accounts were managed going forward. She answered each one specifically. Then she said something I had not expected. I want you to know that I should have been watching this account more closely. That's not an excuse. That's accountability. It was a real apology. The second real one she had given me. I appreciated them both more than I said. I accepted the promotion. 6 months after the contract was signed, the Carver account was our department's strongest performing partnership. Philip Adeyemi's team completed the first 2 implementation phases ahead of the original schedule. Philip sent a commendation note to Nadia's office, copied to senior leadership. He described the phasing structure that had made the difference. He described the responsiveness and technical depth of his primary contact. He used my name. I read it at my desk on a Thursday morning, forwarded it to my archive, and sat with it for a moment. I thought about the original Monday afternoon, Donovan dropping a dead account on my desk with no expectations attached. He handed it to me because it was worthless. An assignment with no upside and every downside. Something he could walk away from if it failed. He was right about one part. He did step in when it succeeded. He just miscalculated where the right moment actually was. The right moment was not the applause. It was Philip's email. And when that email arrived, asking for one specific person, no amount of performance could change what it said or who it said it to. You can take someone's presentation. You can take their slides and their strategy and their words. You cannot take what a client knows. I walk into the Carver Industrial Building 4 times a year now, for the quarterly implementation reviews. Philip Adeyemi's team meets us in the same conference room each time. There is always coffee and a printed agenda and the easy atmosphere of people who have worked together long enough to trust each other. At the most recent review, Philip shook my hand and said, "I tell people your company sent us 3 consultants and only one of them actually listened." I thanked him. I meant it in more ways than he knew. I think about the morning Donovan accepted that applause sometimes. Not with bitterness. More with the clarity that comes after a long, complicated thing has finally resolved into something simple and true. He tried to take my voice. He stood at the front of a room and used my words and accepted my credit and assumed the story was settled. What he forgot was that the story is never settled in the room where it is being performed. It is settled in the places where the real work happened. In the documents, in the call logs, in the memory of the person who trusted you enough to pick up the phone and ask for you by name when it mattered. The most devastating thing I could do to a man who stole my voice was stand quietly while the people who mattered realized they had been listening to the wrong one. I did not plan that. I just did the work. The truth did the rest.